As you, so as you were going around the room, was there anyone that was not able to find anyone to connect with? That your paper is totally blank, you didn't get any signatures at all? Okay, cool. So everybody was at least able to get one signature. All right, cool. How many people were able to get 10 signatures? 10. All right, cool. So let's give these guys a hand. Give them a hand. Woo! So as you were walking around the room, were there things that you saw in someone else's paper and you were like, man, why not think of that? Or I wish I would have wrote that down. What were some of those things that people saw in other people's papers and it was like, I should have wrote that down? Risk. All right.
Play hard.
Play hard.
Leisure.
Security. Respect. Spirituality. Creativity. You saw that and you were like, I should have wrote that down. All right, cool. As you were also walking around, were there some things that were more difficult to find someone to sign on? Or maybe you didn't get anybody to sign on at all? All right, yes, ma'am. Knitting. All right. So please raise your hand if knitting is either of importance or value to you, even if you like knitted sweaters or getting those booties at Christmas time, right?
Yes.
You said yes. So if knitting is of value to you, even if it wasn't written on your paper, please raise your hand.
I like clothes.
Okay, cool. So you like clothes.
Yeah.
Right. Cool. What was something else that someone either didn't get? Yes,
I didn't
sir.
get anybody under self-awareness.
Self-awareness. Please raise your hand if self-awareness is of value or importance to you, even if it wasn't written on your paper. Okay, cool. One more.
Coffee.
Please raise your hand if coffee is of value, even if it wasn't written on your paper. All right, good. What's the obvious lesson or what's the obvious point of this particular exercise?
More in common than different.
That we have more in common than we are different. So a lot of times, and I don't know how many times you've been anyone been in a diversity workshop before that I haven't done? All right, cool. You are the people I have to fix. Because a lot of times those diversity workshops or sensitivity trainings or cultural competence trainings oftentimes do more damage than they do good. And typically because they come from a paradigm that is no longer applicable in the same ways that it was when it, or doesn't have to meet the same need that it did when it was created. And so the conversation typically goes that white people, particularly white men, are evil and bad. And that people of color are noble and good for suffering through the evil white man. What does that do? He said, I recall that.
Yeah. Very well.
What does that do in terms of the motivation of the white man in terms of wanting to fight for justice and equality for everyone? Does that increase their motivation or decrease their motivation? It certainly would be a discouragement to me, right? At the same time, whatever we can say about another group of people, we can also say about our own group of people. So I want you to just think of this. Think of a stereotype. Not one that you necessarily hold yourself, but one maybe you've heard in popular media about a group of people. These people steal, or these people are drunks, or these people can't jump. Right? So some stereotype that you've heard about a group of people. Now what I'd like you to do is to take both of your hands, wrap them around your family tree, and shake it. And see who falls out of your family tree. Does a drunk fall out of your family tree? Does a thief fall out of your family tree? Does someone who can't dance fall out of your family tree? And so whatever we can say about another group of people, we can also say about not only our group of people, but even our own families. And so as human beings, we're so much more alike than we are different. Now, I find it interesting that I've done this activity a number of times, and I'm going to see if my hypothesis holds true with you as well. All right? So, did anyone in those, So I had you write down 5 things that are of value or importance to you. All right? Did anyone write down their ethnicity or racial group as one of those 5 things? So you did.
I erased.
You did, but you erased it.
But I still keep it because I'm proud of who I am.
Okay, so you're proud of who you are. All right, so you wrote, and what did you write down specifically?
I wrote down my nationality, Hmong.
Hmong. So you wrote down Hmong, okay? And then you erased it. Okay? We're going to hold on to that. We'll come back to that. So the majority of us did not write down our race or our ethnicity as one of those 5 things that was of value or importance to us. Did anyone write down their gender or their gender identity as one of those 5 things that are of value or importance to you? No. Okay? For this one, what I want you to do is, if you can say yes to this, I want you to jump up in the air and wave your hands in the air like you don't care. Did anyone put their social-economic status as one of those things that was of value or importance to them? Huh. So, we understand that this gentleman wrote down Hmong because that's of value and importance to him. Why did the rest of us not put those things as things on our circles? Why did we not write them down? Why did we not put, the rest of us put our race or put our gender or our ethnicity or our socioeconomic status? Why did we not write those things down? Marco!
There's more important things. Yeah.
There are more important things. Like what?
Yeah, that's a hard question.
It didn't even occur to me to write those things down.
It didn't occur to you to write those things
I think
down.
there
But it occurred to, but this is the interesting thing. It occurred to him to write it down.
Right, right.
Yes, ma'am.
maybe they're invisible when the culture at large allows you to feel that they're invisible. They're
So
not
maybe
things
they're
that you
in-
have to significantly think about regularly.
So you don't.
That.
So because you don't have to think about those things on a regular basis,
Yeah.
because the culture that you're in may be supportive of those
Right.
things. It's not something that you have to think about.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
Because
I'll go with that.
just thinking as a woman, I feel like if I grew up in a different culture, I think that would have come to mind
Okay.
as being significant.
Okay. So if
But
you
I
grew up in
feel fortunate that I don't have to constantly think about I'm a woman, so therefore whatever, a bunch of stuff.
okay.
So I
Cool.
do.
Other folks.
I think kind of almost the opposite of that. Like,
Okay.
I grew up in my mom's side was very German Catholic, and as much as that's fine, you don't really talk about or promote yourself as German Catholic because my grandparents grew up in Germany during Nazi Germany, and promoting yourself as German was not a good thing. So as much as, yeah, we know it, it was kind of oppress that part of you. So almost like, don't identify with that part, even though you are proud of your identity, don't necessarily make that something that you value.
Yeah. So don't call it hamburger. Call it Salisbury steak. Right? So there's parts of us that we're not proud of being, so we don't talk about those things because people may think negatively of us because of
Promoting that part
that part of who we are. All right? I saw another hand over here somewhere. Yes, sir.
See, mine is kind of the opposite as well. I was raised and taught not to have any value. See, I grew up in the 60s when we were getting hoes and dogs biting you, that type of thing. So to be equal, you got to do twice as much.
Okay. And that is a heck of a motivator, isn't it?
You better believe it.
Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else want to do twice as much as somebody else just to get the equal amount that they have? Yeah, that always perplexes me because my grandparents would tell me that you got to work twice as hard. Why would I want to do that? I just want to participate. I'll make my own way, and I don't have to work so hard to get what other people don't want me to have in the first place. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, because I'm Jewish, so and my family was in Germany, and they have that history from the Holocaust, so there was the inevitable that if you don't put yourself out there and you don't call attention to yourself, you want people to know.
Right.
So that's been passed down. I mean, I haven't I've experienced a little bit of that growing up, not as much, but it doesn't take very long to hit up against it. You know, the Jews are this, the Jews are that. So there has been that part of you don't call attention to yourself.
You hide.
Well, yeah, you hide or you conceal it or you don't make it a big deal to make it pronounced.
Yeah, yeah. As a Hmong man, do you get the opportunity to hide?
I learned it from the elderly, and they always teach us that in order for you to prosper, you have to help yourself. And one way to do that is you have to do self-promoting. So the way I put myself down as a Hmong, if I don't respect myself as a Hmong, people will not respect me.
They will not respect you as a Hmong.
Right.
Is that right? Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if I see myself as a value person, I have to keep
Promoting yourself.
promoting myself.
Okay.
Because I don't do that in the future, many people will just say, he's an American.
Yeah.
But I want to keep Hmong as part of myself as Hmong, a man.
Yeah, yeah. Now, and it's funny because people will say the goofiest things. They will say stuff like, when will we get away from calling ourselves Hmong American or African American or and why don't we just call ourselves American? Have you ever heard someone say that and use that argument? Anyone heard that argument before? Okay, so I'm not making it up, right? Because people talk like that, right? Now, this is the thing I think is so interesting because this is another case of the dominant culture blaming a subordinate culture for adequately adapting itself to the dominant culture.
Say that again.
That's deep, man.
Yeah, that's true.
This is it's a classic example of the dominant culture blaming a subordinate culture for their adequate adaptation to the dominant culture. Another example. If a woman stands up for her rights and she speaks her mind, what is she called?
B-I-C-C-H.
Is that flattering?
No.
Some people might say, well, I might find that flattering. But the intention is not to be flattering. People ask me crazy questions like this, too. They say, well, black people have BET, Black Entertainment Television. People would be up in arms if white people had white TV. People say that, right? But white people do have white TV. So Fox News, CNN, CNBC, right? All of this stuff. And so, and I'm not saying BET is the end all be all because I think it's been bought by the same conglomeration of media outlets, so it's the same as everything else. But I think the original intention of BET was to show black videos because MTV did not think that black videos were worthy enough or could actually be palatable enough. So black people said, we'll start our own. Black universities, historically black colleges, still exist, and people say, you're being separatist. Why is it that my adaptation to the culture, I'm being now held hostage and blamed for when you wouldn't let me play in the first place? So women oftentimes get blamed for their excelling. And what people sometimes forget is that there is so much abundance. That scarcity, that the idea of scarcity, that there's only so much, does not serve us, but it serves the higher masters. It serves the owners, the people who tell us that we're supposed to eat. Did you know that, do you remember the food pyramid? Growing up, right? So it was like 4, 4, 3, 2 or something like that, bread, milk, blah, blah, blah. Do you know who created that?
The government.
No, it wasn't even the government. It was the farmers. So here are the people telling us this is what you should eat to have a happy and healthy life. Well, who's it benefiting? It's benefiting them. So so we have to be really critical about what we believe, what people have told us. And I'm not saying that we need to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but we at least need to look in there to make sure that it's really a baby in there. Right? So that's important. Because one of the things that I have found has been problematic is that there's been this move to talk about cultural competence, right? And I don't know if you've heard that in your workplaces or not, but there's this real move and this drive to talk about cultural competence. And I have to say that is a great approach, and I'm glad people are talking about that, but it oftentimes falls short because they miss some very key points about what culture is. And so, what is culture? How would you define culture? What is a culture?
Values. I'm going to say values.
So values, all right. Julie?
I just think how we spend our time as a group of people. I guess that would be values. We spend our time doing what we value.
Okay. We spend our time doing what we value. What is a culture?
It's also shared experiences. And so within that culture, there's the shared values, experiences, beliefs, practices.
Okay.
And it's something about that sharing.
Okay, so something about that sharing. Because you guys are in a multicultural class. So I would hope you'd have a more rapid-fire explanation of what a culture is.
It's what we eat.
Okay, so it's what we eat.
What we eat, what we wear.
Okay, it's what we wear, what we eat.
Language,
Language.
sports,
Art. Okay. Anyone seen the movie Titanic with Leonardo DiCaprio? Right. And what was the song that the lady sang at the? No, that's Whitney Houston.
My heart will go on.
Keep going.
My heart will go on and
Yes.
on.
Yes.
Right, so Celine Dion, right? Carrie's like, I love that song. I love that.
Yeah.
Right. So here we go. So here is the Titanic, and here is Leonardo DiCaprio in front of the boat. I'm king of the world. You know. So he's doing that. So what was it that did the Titanic in? Like what sank it? Other than the people's pride and their their insanity of unsinkableness and challenging creativity and what's the law where everything goes wrong? Murphy's Law, right? So they challenged Murphy's Law. Outside of that stuff, what was it that actually damaged the ship in such a way that it couldn't continue on its journey?
iceberg.
The icebergs, right? So did they not see the icebergs?
I think that they did, but they believed that their ship was invincible, basically.
So they believed that their ship was invincible. They did see the icebergs, and they said,
no big deal.
no big deal. We're going to do this anyway, right? And so what was the damaging part? Was it the part that they could see that caused them damage?
No, underneath.
It was the part that's underneath, right? And so when we talk about culture, we have to talk about it, or I like to talk about it in terms of a cultural iceberg. And there are these two parts that, one you can see, and one you can't see. We'll call these artifacts, and we'll call these values. All right? So what are some of the artifacts of culture? So you go to certain restaurants, you meet people, you go to certain places on the planet, and people, wear stuff or things are different. What are some clear demarcations of the differences in cultures that we can see?
Music.
So music.
Food.
Music, food, fashion, clothing,
Type of housing.
housing.
Type of sustaining your life, like whether you use money or you just have cows or you
Okay.
hunt your food every
Can I
day.
say trade or
Yeah.
but sustaining is a part of that?
Yeah.
Okay. Language. All right. What else? Government. Okay, so style of government.
Just religion.
Religion, okay. So you can see a religion.
Mhm.
You can see how it's demonstrated.
Okay, so you can see how it's demonstrated. Okay, cool, cool. What are some other things that we can see, or that we might call artifacts?
Any type of like art or.
Okay, so give me some examples of art.
Sculpture.
So sculpture.
Pottery.
Okay.
Jewelry. Like that, how people decorate themselves.
Okay. All right, cool. So that's enough. We could actually go on and on and on about the things that we can see about the culture. Now, what are some things that we can't necessarily see about a culture, or only are applicable if we're in that culture? Like, I would only know these things if I were a part of this culture.
Behaviors?
Okay, give me an example of certain behaviors. What do you mean?
Social norms, you mean?
Okay, so social norms.
Like you don't do such and such, it's considered rude.
Okay, so social norms and taboos. Right? What else?
Education, I don't know where that would fit.
Like
A culture could be educated, like if there's a certain level of type of education,
so what education is, okay,
what it means.
and what it means.
Worldview.
Worldview. Give me an example. What do you mean by that?
Well, I grew up in Guatemala in a small Indian village, and they're very fatalistic. If it rains, it rains. If it doesn't, we starve.
Okay.
Like,
So worldview. And can I also, kind of look at that, destiny versus fate?
yeah.
I think we talked about this in class, kind of the locus of control concept with that. What you went off what you were.
Yep, locus of control.
Slang.
Slang, okay. Life, death, marriage, relationship to nature, family structure, time, the definition of time, the relationship to God or no God, right? Relationship to nature. And so these are all things that we can't necessarily see unless we're part of this culture. We don't understand these things unless we're part of the culture. Now, what I'd like to submit to you is something that you might not hear very often, which is all of these things that I can see are demonstrations of all of the values that a culture has. That these things only exist because they relate to the values that a culture has. This is the manifestation or the expression of the values that a culture has. So, here is the problem with modern media. Now, actually, let's do this real quick. Let's do this exercise, and then I'll finish this piece of the lecture. If you open up your handout to the center, you'll see a chart. You'll see a chart that talks about right under the barriers to my humanity. On the left side of the chart, you see groups of people or groups that have tried to give you information about the categories across the top of that chart. All right? So I believe that the first category is African Americans. So I want you to tell me what your parents and family taught you about African Americans. If they taught you something that was positive, I want you to put a plus. If they taught you something that was negative, I want you to put a minus. If it was never anything you talked about, I want you to put a 0. And I want you to do that for every category on that piece of paper. All right? Pluses, minuses, and zeros. And you can have plus and minuses in the same box. But the size of your plus and the size of your minus will determine how much you learn. So a big plus means a lot of positive. A little negative means a little bit of negative. All right?
Does it have to be from family?
Family taught?
Each one of those, there are.
Oh, I see.
Yep. So there are lots of categories. So for each one of those categories, if you can address that, that would be great.
Sorry, I got to the point of the.
I wasn't expecting that.
It's all right, man. You